every movie has random trivia. And here at Trivial Theater, I explore some of these movies and the random circumstances that make them the weird creations that we love. Welcome back to the Favorites Theater, home to some of my more obscure movie faves. This week we're going with an Edgar Allen Poe classic, interpreted by Roger Corman and Vincent Price. This is 1964's Masque of the Red Death. Our story begins with a hooded figure giving an elderly peasant a rose, which ends up being both a metaphor for death and the plague. Elsewhere, in a poor medieval village, a carriage that reminds me way too much of the mausoleum from Plan 9 from Outer Space nearly pulls a hit and run on a small child. The less than reputable Prince Prospero emerges and flexes his princely riches over the locals by inviting them to enjoy the leftover scraps of a banquet at his castle. A hot-headed peasant named Gino calls out Prospero's douchebaggery and is promptly sentenced to die. His lover Francesca comes to his rescue. At the same time, a scream indicates that the Red Death has arrived in all of its bloody glory. Prospero flees with Francesca, her father, and Gino to the safety of the castle, leaving his men to do the perfectly reasonable act of burning down the village. Although this is a terribly sad scene, I'm still distracted by how more than one person could fit in that carriage. As you do in the Middle Ages, Prospero intends to use both men for dinner entertainment. He also seeks to turn Francesca's strong faith in God into a strong faith in something else. The castle is considered a stronghold against the Red Death, filled with nobles who now owe everything to Prospero, and will do whatever he says, including really terrible animal impressions.
How like a pig you are. Be one. Can you be a worm, Lampredi? It is like nothing so much as a braying jackass.
To quote a wise Jedi, "You will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy." After witnessing a crazy awesome swan tub and the best wine-based bitch slap I've ever seen, we're introduced to a series of colored rooms, including one preceded by incredibly ominous music. It turns out that this dark room, both in color and in tone, is a chapel to the devil. Yep, Prospero and pretty much everybody else in the castle calls Satan homie, buddy, or bro. And Prospero's lover Juliana wants to become his boo. She even brands herself. That's right, she's got a metaphorical hickey from the Dark Lord himself. A giant boar's head introduces us to the titular Masque, with Gino and Francesca's father providing halftime entertainment. Everything goes according to plan until Francesca's dad tries to poke Prospero. Prospero returns the favor by sticking a sword in him. In the resolution of one subplot, we get backup entertainment, in the form of a guy in an ape suit tied to a chandelier who is casually lit on fire. In a typical response to this, everybody dances, wearing colorful costumes that stand in stark contrast to the terrible world outside the gates. But not for long. Prospero notices a figure wearing red, the one thing forbidden at the Masque. He and Francesca track the hooded figure to the Black Room, where he comes face to face with what he assumes to be the devil. Through a series of interesting transitions, the figure changes the merry masque into a dance of death. It turns out Prospero has confused the devil with actual death, and death has come for him wearing his own face. Prospero is engulfed by his fellow dead nobles, and Francesca escapes with Gino. We're left with a final scene of various incarnations of death representing 7 different medieval plagues, including the Black Death, leprosy, porphyria, cholera, yellow fever, tuberculosis, and rabies. Corman directed 8 movies that are collectively known as the Poe cycle, starting with The House of Usher in 1960 and ending with The Tomb of Ligeia in 1965. Masque of the Red Death was the 7th in the series and is considered the most faithful adaptation. The cast of this one stands pretty well, but as always, Vincent Price shines above the rest. He plays Prospero with an unstated maliciousness that just radiates off him. A single look is all it takes to know he's in it for himself, regardless of what comes out of his mouth. I was first exposed to both Poe and Corman as a kid with Pin and the Pendulum, a movie that both scared the shit out of 8-year-old me and made me endlessly fascinated with Roger Corman's work. I ran across this one a few years back, and it stands as my favorite of the bunch. I love Corman's Poe-era movies. They're always done in such vibrant colors, but the stories themselves are so incredibly morbid. It's a fascinating contrast that I absolutely adore. But detail work that goes into a Corman film, considering the low budget and the time available, never ceases to amaze me. This particular film was shot in the UK to take advantage of British production subsidies over the course of 5 weeks, 2 weeks longer than most any other film done by AIP, the production company that financed Corman's films. Corman felt this was necessary because British crews worked a little slower. His words, not mine. The extensive castle sets were reused from a BAFTA-winning movie called Beckett. This was another Corman staple. Why build new when you can reuse? Corman was a friggin' assembly line when it came to movies, and completely calculating when it came to budget. There wasn't a penny wasted, and his efficiency is what makes him such a prolific filmmaker, racking up 415 producer credits in a career that spans 65 years. Looking back, Masque is considered to be one of Corman's best, but as is often the case with more artistic ventures, it didn't do as well at the box office, being considered too, quote, artsy-fartsy, and not scary enough. It's good to know that audiences don't change. Corman also directed the 1989 remake, which is considered a less stylized, slightly cheaper, more forgettable adaptation. Masque of the Red Death is a fascinating imagining of Poe's work, and both visually and thematically, it's a beautiful thing to behold. There's a reason it's on the 1000 and 1 movies to see before you die. All of Corman's Poe cycle movies are good, but if you want to see the best of the best, check out Masque of the Red Death. So what do you think? Suggestions for movies, trivial questions, comments, ratings, and a hookup for one of those fantastic death robes would be appreciated. Thank you so very much for watching.